I like to say, welcome everyone to Arts at Blue Roof. This is our art talk with our spring artist in residence, Brenda Gonzalez, and she is in conversation with her host and friend, Julia Rigby. They're going to be talking about process and art and what her experience being a resident here at Arts at Blue Roof and just overall where she is as an artist. So I'll pass it over to you, Julia, and I can't wait to hear what Brenda has to share with us.
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. I think my family's not muted yet.
So we will ask if everyone could mute while they talk, and we're going to have questions at the end. If you want to, you can put it in the chat or just stay on, and then we'll be able to open it up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Connie. Yay.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So excited to be here. And so I just wanted to start our conversation because talking about how we first met. So Brenda and I, we met in grad school. We were part of the class of 2020.
Pandemic class.
Yeah, with at UC Davis in the MFA studio art program. And we were practically studio neighbors and lots of like late night kitchen snack hangouts. And so I've been able to see your work change, Brenda, since then, you know, the past 5 years. And it's been really exciting, especially like in this capsule of the residency, seeing how much your work has like evolved and changed. And I was just hoping you could start the conversation by telling us, what were you doing in grad school? What kind of work were you making then?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go a little bit before grad school just to kind of set, I guess, the scene. Back in 2015, 2016, when I was just leaving undergrad, I was doing sculptures with paper, and I was just exploring form, and I was actually stitching that paper together. Then I transitioned into soft sculpture when I started my post-bac program, a post-baccalaureate program at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts, and that's the time I started making what I call creature sculptures. So I was going to thrift stores and getting fabrics from thrift stores and dollar stores, and I continued that work at UC Davis. At UC Davis, I was doing those creature sculptures too, but I was trying to see how I could expand upon them. So I took walks in the UC Davis Arboretum. I went to the Botanical Conservatory at UC Davis as well and tried to use the plant life as inspiration for my forms. I also, when it came to sculpture, I started using found objects there. So furniture, things like lampshades as well. And that was kind of like my big breakthrough during the program, because home is not just fabrics. It's composed of these kind of harder elements as well. And another kind of pivotal moment for me during my graduate program was learning how to edit videos and doing stop motion animation. I TA'd for Darren Martin's class, and that's how I got to learn about videos and animation and was able to kind of bring my work to life in a new way.
Yeah, the Arboretum I could see that, like these like mammalian forms coming out of like these plants that you were working with. But so also, you know, basically we went through grad school together, then we went through the pandemic together, and then you emerged from that period into this amazing residency, and you having the solo show, which we're in the space right now for your exhibition, and that's what these pieces are all from. And so I'm curious about like right now where you are in your life, your artistic practice at this residency. You know, your experiences here, and also how is it like comparing to your other residencies that you've done?
Yeah, so I'll start off with the other residencies first, because just chronologically, I think I can organize it that way. But so the most recent residencies I did were in the summer of 2019. I did 2 back-to-back, kind of sandwiched in between like first year of grad school and second year of grad school. And the first one was this residency called Tropical Lab. It was called Tropical Lab 13th it was the 13th iteration of it, but it was in Singapore and it was 2 weeks. And it had artists from all over the world. And we were kind of working towards this show at the end of the 2 weeks around the theme of erasure. We worked in this large open studio space all together, and also took tours around Singapore. Saw some interesting theme parks with statues and dioramas based on Chinese mythology that were very cool. And it was a kind of a short but intense experience. I felt like I got to know them very well at that time. And then Vermont Studio Center was a residency I did like pretty much right after that, which was also a combination of artists and writers from all over the world, but we were all kind of in this isolated place, Johnson, Vermont. And, we had room and board and our own studio spaces, but we had like the freedom to work at our own pace. So that was nice too. But this residency differs from those in that I really view it as, an investment to myself as an artist in LA. Like,
Nice.
especially after like now that 3 years have passed since the pandemic started. I wasn't really making art, but now this is kind of like me trying to put a lot more effort into the residency, and there's been so many ways in which this residency has done that.
Nice. I like that, investing as like an artist in LA, based in LA, because you're already like, you've been working and living in LA your whole life, and you're also like involved in so many community projects. You volunteer at Craft Contemporary, and now you're here at this residency. So like I've always seen that, but I do see how like this residency is you like really planting your roots. You're like investing in that, like you're an LA artist. But I remember when you went to the Vermont Studio Center, you came back telling about like swimming in the lakes and like you're in the hills, you're in the forest.
I can't say, but they weren't like,
they were lakes.
Yeah, there were like rivers we passed by, but I went to Bread and Puppet Theater. That was really good to see. But it was very isolated, lots of hikes and very good bread.
Yes, the fresh bread every meal, which makes me want to go there so badly.
Yeah.
But like when you came, so right, so you were there, in a residency that's like more in the woods, surrounded by nature. And then this is very exciting and very different because you're in the like heart of LA. You're like very urban here. And so, I'm curious like how a room of one's own, that this residency has offered you something different from those residencies.
So I really view this period as kind of a time of growth for me as an artist. First of all, I've never had like a residency that's been so long. At least for me, like those previous 2 residencies I mentioned were only a few weeks long. This one is a 4-month residency, and only 3 of those months are in the studio, and it goes by so quickly. I didn't expect how quickly it would go by. But I think the only similar experience I had was maybe like going on a study abroad trip to Japan, like an undergrad, but I was studying Japanese language back then. And I never considered, because I went to faraway places for those previous residencies, that a residency could be so close to home. And that's something I really like enjoyed about this residency. Although I still have to commute, this residency has allowed me to create close to home and have my work be in dialogue with that home and with my family. So that's been really great for me. Again, I took a long, I don't know, I think I might have mentioned this already, but I took a long pause from making work after grad school in 2020. So this residency, I felt like it came at the right time for me because it allowed me kind of the physical space to make work, walk around my sculptures, make pieces simultaneously. And, having my family around, and, they've been like a real resource for me as well. They've been, since I don't have a car, they've been like, they gave me rights to the studio and helped me bring large materials. And then I've never made large work at a residency before. And I was able to like fully focus on that because of just being in LA and being around family and having the resources that Arts at Blue Roof has provided for me.
I think it was like really special because I got to see your studio here and it's gorgeous. You get like beautiful window, huge space, lots of floor space, which I know is important for you because you're like me, you work on the floor, you're building your sculptures. But I also saw you started to build your sculptures on the wall, which is very different for you, which is exciting. And you know, being in this like a very like open studio space, like I feel like it kind of allowed you to expand in those ways. Like literally, your sculptures are like amoebas crawling off the walls onto the ceiling, you know. And so, and also your work has always been about like home, the domestic, and those comforts of home. And I think it's really special that you get to do this amazing intensive residency very close to home, you know.
Yeah, it's nice to get to go home at the end of the day and kind of like reflect on what I'm doing in the studio and see how what happens at home affects my work too. It's been very interesting.
Yeah, you're like, it's not like those residencies when you're separated from home, you're maybe like across the entire country, or in this case, like Singapore. Here it's like you get this feedback between your home and the studio, like where you work at. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you also about like, so in grad school, when we were together, we were in a cohort, a small one, but it was awesome. It was awesome. It was great. We all shared the building together, and then we also it was first years and second years. So, and then when you did these other residencies, you also had a cohort, some larger than others, and then this residency, you were flying solo, like no cohort, which for me personally, that's harder. And I'm just curious about how that influenced your practice, your process, what it was like this time not having a cohort.
Yeah, well, I felt like this residency was a time for me to kind of focus on kind of bringing out all these ideas that I've been like having in the back of my brain. So at first, especially the first couple of months, I was kind of just like coming into the studio and like really just like trying to focus on getting work, because I also kind of had this fear, like I could invite people to the studio, but I was also just scared that I don't work fast enough making sculptures. I was like, I just got to get in here and work and work. But like towards the later half of the residency, like in March, I was like, oh, you know, there's like this art show with all the previous Arts at Blue Roof artists in residence. And then I was like, oh, I can go to that. And it's been nice to realize that even though there isn't like a simultaneous cohort, there is kind of a community, well, there is a community created with everyone involved in this program. So, you know, I got to meet Carmen Margones through volunteering at the Craft Contemporary. That's how I met her for the first time. And I was like, hey, I'm actually doing the residency that you did. And then I got to meet Dalia Palacio. She was the last year's artist in residence for the fall. I met her at an exhibition walkthrough that my mentor Claudia Lisa organized. I also, you know, I keep in touch with future artists in residence like Alexandria, who's in the fall.
Oh, cool.
Who will be artist in residence in the fall, and of course Connie. Connie was the first artist in residence in this program. And then of course Lisa Dan Wedgeworth, the executive director, and Galia, and then she's the founder. So like I feel like it's so cool to get to like go to these events that you know people are involved in the program are exhibiting into, and like I was like, oh, there is a community here, and like I feel like I can invest time into this community because you know, not like in the previous residencies and even in grad school, everyone you know had to go their separate ways. I feel like there's a little bit more stability here, which has been nice.
And like something about you know local artists being able to like show locally, because we went together to the show at USC of some of the artists who've been here. It was amazing just getting to see everybody's work in that beautiful space too. So it's really special. I'm curious too, Brenda, like how this residency has challenged you, any moments of like stretching or growth that you've experienced, because it's been a long time, like 4 months.
Well, I'll start off by saying that luckily the least challenging part of this residency was being in the studio, which I thought would be challenging for me because again, I hadn't made work in a while, and I was like, am I a sculptor still? I don't know, but I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. There's a muscle memory there. But in terms of like the most challenging aspect of it, I think, has been expressing myself or my thoughts about the work
Yeah.
in words, whether that is verbally or written. And, I have to like, write scripts for myself and try to find the words that describe a little bit of what happens in the studio. Because in the studio, it's just materials. I'm like making connections between materials. I'm like, oh, okay, this color goes with this color, or this glass tile looks like the print on this cyanotype. It's like, oh, okay, those are the connections. But like articulating that has been something that I've continuously had to work on during this residency, but luckily there have been many opportunities to work on it. So there's like the Q&A I did for Instagram in March, I believe, and then the LA Weekly article that there's that room of one's own residency organized, and also, I mean, just the opening and getting to talk to some other people that have come to see the show in person. Those have all been opportunities that I'm like trying to use to improve every day, in terms of like talking about my work.
Nice. Which, yeah. Like, also one thing I was wondering about is like, so you had 4 months at this residency, but it was also like from the start, go, because you had to get ready for a solo exhibition, and like really you only have 3 months to get ready. Like, this is all an entirely new body of work. And so I'm just wondering, like, personally, as someone who has struggles with time management, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you work with the time constraints? Because, how did you, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember from grad school, my time management skills weren't the best, but
Same.
but I mean, one of the key reasons I had to learn how to manage my time is because of like, the deadline for the show, obviously, but because like I don't have a car. So I guess you could say that where I'm from, or my home, East LA, is not that far from South LA if you drive a car, but because I don't drive a car, I have to commute by bus, and bus can take me like a little bit over an hour in the morning, but like in the evening over 2 hours often.
Yeah.
So time is precious in the studio. So some of the things I did to kind of control my time in the studio were writing down my plan for the day in the planner when I got to the studio, and then having like a little calendar on the wall as well, where I marked off how many days I was in the studio, just kind of visually see if I was in here enough.
Yeah.
And also using an app called Pomodoro, which is based on like the Pomodoro time management technique. But I kind of adjusted the time. So I did 50 minutes of like work and then an 8-minute break. And I did that maybe for like 3 instances, and then like a little bit of a longer break. But having kind of an app to externally manage my time was very helpful for me. I'm like, okay, I'll listen to the app. I won't listen to myself that wants to, watch maybe a little bit more of this TV show while I take a break. But it's like, oh, that was really helpful. Like, and that's part of why I wanted to do this residency too, because I wanted to kind of learn how to do that. In grad school we had like classes CTA or classes CTA, and like that kind of dictated how we used our time. But for this, I was like, oh, I'm managing my own time. How do I do that? How do I motivate myself? And that's how I try.
Yeah, especially when, again, you're a cohort of one, you have to keep yourself on a schedule. There's no one else to help you, keep on that. So yeah. Also, Brenda, can you talk to us about the title of your show? Because personally speaking, I think it's brilliant. I love the idea of creature comforts for a lot of reasons, but I'm just curious what you have to say about it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I've called my sculptures creatures for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I was reading, I can't remember like the exact information of what I was reading, but I was reading a book on about the artist Carlos Almaraz, and the phrase creature comforts came up, and I couldn't get it out of my head. Creature comforts can be defined as material comforts that contribute to physical ease and well-being, such as good food and accommodations. So in my work, I think about how a sense of home can be composed of of like the objects around us. And I wonder like, what would happen if those objects came to life, kind of like Toy Story, but for
Yeah.
other furniture in the house. So like furniture, pillows, if the energy that went into like selecting those objects or living with those objects could, you know, become sentient, then what would that be like? And you know, admittedly, since I've called them creature comforts for a long time, I was like, I mean creatures for a long time, I was like, creature comforts, it fits,
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'm good.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're composed, the works here are composed of creature comforts, but they're not necessarily like comforting to look at, or at least not all of them. Maybe they can be a little awkward or, you know, scary. They're a little like Frankenstein together. Sometimes you can see the stitch.
Yeah.
But in any case, they're like composed of objects that resonate with my associations of home. And I imagine them like roaming around the floor. Like this one could be roaming around the floor, like using this little circular element to scoop up, you know, like parts of pillows and things and make it soft. So, you know, they're like on the floor, they can be slouching or floating or some like this pink piece that can't really be seen in the video, but you know, they're like mid-transformation, and grommets and doorknobs are like unusual eyes and things like that.
Yeah, it's like it's sort of a double play because they're composed of these domestic objects like bath mats and like tablecloths and seat cushions, and then they're also speaking to the domestic, and like especially in your animations, because like this one was crawling on the floor in the animation that you can see if you come to the show.
Nice plug.
Yeah, you come to the show, and then you could also see this one too, and cool. But yeah, so you're the work speaks to that already. But well, while we're talking about that, I wanted to touch on your material choices. So the last 5 years that I've known you and seen you work, it's been really interesting. Like first and foremost, your color palette to me is fantastic in so many ways, but also because like I think you're a sculptor who has like such an like intimate understanding of like color theory that you push it in ways that are very exciting. Like one time in grad school, we had a studio visit with Julia Cousins, who's an amazing artist based in Sacramento. And I remember we were all in your studio and she was shocked. She was like, wow, these are such ugly color combinations. But I didn't see it, I saw it as nothing but a compliment because like it was this idea that you're so familiar with what colors could and couldn't work in what ways, and you like play with those and you push them to an extreme that is sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but it works. And so I just like, I love that comment because I thought it like summed it up. It's like, yes, that's what you're doing. You're like, you're stretching the possibilities of like what colors could and couldn't go together and work and not work. Yeah, you just make it all work. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I like to think I know what I'm doing, but I think also when Julia Cousins made that comment, maybe I was just not thinking about color as much. I was trying to trust like my gut, and but I mean maybe that was thinking about color. I was trying to, I guess, lean into the colors of the objects I was getting at the thrift store, and there were lots of grays and beiges. That's what I remember. I mean, I think it can be generative to use colors that you don't like and see where that leads you.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah. But for this show, at least, you know, I think it can be kind of obvious that lots of the sculptures have a color assigned to them, and that's how I organized my thought process in the studio, because I'm like, I knew I only have 3 months to make a show. Like, how can I separate the ideas behind these sculptures? I mean, they're kind of like intrinsically related already because of the way that I make stitching objects together, but kind of being like, oh, this is the white one, this is the gray, the brown one, this is the blue one, this is a pink one, that's like a red one. That's how I kind of distinguish the pieces in the studio space. And then in some of them, I was like, okay, it can go beyond being just a red piece or whatever. Like I can add some orange to the blue, and, you know, play with the complements. But for the most part, yeah, it's how I organize thoughts. And I was like, I haven't really done that much of that I guess, in previous work, so it's one to try it out. And yeah, cyanotypes were a big incentive too, so like cyanotypes.
Pop the blue, because in grad school, I think a lot of your sculptures were these amalgamations of like drab domestic objects from the thrift shop. And like here at this residency, like going to your studio and seeing like an entire sculpture like pinned to the wall before it's being stitched together. And it's like, this is the blues, like here's the peaches, like here's the creams, and like it's neat to see how your color process has evolved since then. But also your process of like hand stitching. So when we were in school, I was always like fascinated with how like, you intentionally aren't using a sewing machine. Like you're hand stitching with these big needles. You're able to see the threads. You're seeing the connections that are pulling this together.
Yeah.
And you know, and even you're stitching furniture. You're literally like a furniture seamstress. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I use like sewing machines like a little bit, but for the most part, I think I've like really lately in the past few years, and even in grad school, I've been more inclined to use like a yarn and a yarn and needle to kind of sew through fabric and furniture and plastic things. So yeah, I have like some of my needles here.
Yeah.
I was like, it's show and tell.
Show and tell
For
time.
those that came.
Yeah.
Like I really like this long needle. I don't know, you know, when you're making sculpture, you've got like awkward spots you want to reach, but my favorite is like this curved needle. I feel like an influencer. Anyway, and I call it like the boomerang of needles, so it just kind of comes back, and so it's especially helpful for awkward spots like crevices. You know where the needle's gonna come back out. But yeah, this is my tool of choice for most of the sculptural work here.
Nice.
Yeah, I broke a lot of them. But you know, you can easily get them on Amazon. Even like I got like a few from the dollar store next door. Yeah, and then you know, furniture can just, I was like, I can drill through furniture and then entryways for the yarn, and you know, a lot of things already have holes in them to sew through, like the tiles, like the mosaic tiles here have like a mesh netting glued to the back. I was like, perfect. I've been thinking about that for a while, like for 2 years, like can I use that for a sculpture? And in this residency I have.
The idea of like breaking apart a chair, I do like you know, a special chair. It's significant because it's like a chair that also shows up in the house, like houses like your house, but you're breaking apart and then you're stitching it into this new form. To me, is really, really fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, no, because I got to go with you to we were at grad school in Davis. We would go to the thrift shop a lot, the Yolo County SPCA, and it was really fun to go with Brenda because just like a little window into your minds and how like sometimes be like, why like things you would select, I would have no idea why you were picking it, and then a month later I'd see your student and be like, oh, that's why.
There it is.
Yeah, exactly, there it is. I see where it was going. Yeah, but like I'm curious about your material selection too, because like you know, maybe you could walk us through the thrift shop with you, or how are you selecting these objects and then repurposing them?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of funny because a lot of those objects from that thrift store in grad school are actually in a lot of these works, because I reuse a lot of the parts of old sculptures that you know I wasn't able to keep. But going back to how like my process in a thrift store, or like even like a dollar store, I just go in and I'm drawn to color, I'm drawn to texture. I'm often drawn to things like microfiber rugs and things like that. They look like familiar, yet they can also be unfamiliar when isolated. They can look like the legs of like a caterpillar or something like that. And I'm drawn to that aspect. Well, while in this residency, I often went to the dollar store down the street, and I got these seat cushions. You can see kind of like right here. They're like in quite a few of the pieces, and I was drawn to them because they seemed familiar, even though I've never had those seat cushions. They look like the blankets that many that have like floral patterns, or even like animal patterns, like usually like tigers or elephants and things like that, that are in many like Mexican American homes. I was like, yes, I need all of these.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what I think. Sometimes I'm drawn to something on its own, and then I'll figure it out later, like how it'll play into the work.
It's like an intuitive process for you.
Yeah. But I always, or lately, I know intuition is just kind of like the accumulation of like previous advice and like things like that. Like, I'm like all the little voices of past professors in my head. I'm like, oh yeah.
It's a synthesis, like, right,
Yeah.
yeah. But I've never seen anyone ever apply flocking to furniture. And so, because I remember in grad school, like you flocked the legs of a chair with black flocking, and it made this like a velvety texture on the wood. But now, like in the show, you can see like this delicate, like almost like baby blue flocking to the little like nubs of pieces of furniture that you've pulled apart and stuck elsewhere. And so I think that's also like very special, something special about your work. Yeah.
Thank you. The flocking actually came from a suggestion of like a previous professor at Brandeis, Sean Downey. He was one of the post-bac, like, well, he was involved in the post-bac program at Brandeis, and he told me about flocking. And so it was in the back of my mind. It's kind of like a messy process, you know, you gotta dust this, these tiny fibers on you know, objects, and you deal with like a glue. And I'm like, I'm not too fond of it, but I do like what happens afterwards. Like, it's like a hard object that you can soften up with flocking, and it reminds me of like, I don't know, just like dust, I guess. And using the blue flocking, or actually it's like I use like a blue glue and then white flocking to kind of, in these pieces, I wanted to relate that to the cyanotypes more.
I see that. And also, you know, what you're doing with these chairs again, like, or these pieces that you're composting from, some of these pieces are composted elements from grad school, like 5 years ago, and now they're being repurposed into this new life, like this new form. But at the same time, you're also doing something completely new. So when we were in school, you weren't doing cyanotypes. And now in this show, there's a wall of cyanotypes here and a wall there. And you've also been incorporating cyanotypes on fabric into your sculptures, which the process is fascinating to me. You're collaborating with the non-human, you're collaborating with the sun, and yet you're then working your hand back into it after that collaboration has ended. But this is new, so tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I want to make a comment too about using old sculptures. That was something also that I learned at UC Davis, and you know, it helped me with the time constraints of this residency, because I was like, you know, making new work, it's like tough on its own, but like maybe it doesn't have to all be new. I'm just like using kind of the energy of like old sculptures that, you know, couldn't exist anymore for, you know, logistical reasons and things like that, and putting it into this work, and it becomes something else, something new. But yeah, cyanotypes have been really exciting for me to explore, because I've been thinking about them for a really long time. Back in 2017, I did this program called Soy Artista at Self-Help Graphics, and we did like a little cyanotype workshop, and I didn't think much of it after that. So I was going back to the post-bac program right after that. But last year I began volunteering at the Craft Contemporary, and I volunteered for a cyanotype workshop on fabric, led by, taught by Simone Evans. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool, because cyanotype, you know, is the impression of an object, and that automatically kind of, to me, like, leads like the memory of an object, brings the memory of an object to mind. And I've been trying to figure out ways to personalize my sculptures even more. So I mean, one of the ways I did that was using like materials from the home. So you know, there's like that chair, the dining room chair, that's a recurring element in a lot of the sculptures, and there's like a sheer flower curtain that's also a
Mhm.
recurring motif in many of the sculptures, but cyanotypes I was able to do even more. So I would place objects from around the home, like a broken branch or some, feathers from my dad's chicken coop,
Hmm.
some low plots from our tree. Low plots grow everywhere in East LA around this time.
Hmm.
And then I had those impressions, and then I used them primarily for this blue piece over here. And I still call them blue piece, red piece. So they have titles. I just that's what sticks to mind. I think it's called From the Ground Up. But anyway, I was able to do those impressions of the objects and also do photographic imagery that was even more specific. So I take photos of just like cracks on the sidewalk or the flowers growing in the tree, because I felt like cyanotype was a way for me to bring the outside of my house back into the work, because textiles for me is so about the inside, the domestic. But for me, I felt like there was something missing in this, picture of home I'm trying to create. So cyanotypes were really fun for me to incorporate, and I think cyanotypes were also a way that were also used for blueprints long ago. So that's kind of that association to architecture and homes. So.
And you're using something that speaks to the exterior of your home. So a lot of these have like images of your front door, or maybe a gate, or sunflowers in the garden, or the low pot tree in your front yard. But you're using those images of the exterior to help frame the interior of these sculptures, because you're wrapping these cyanotypes around like the armature, the bones, and then the armature is exposed, so that there's this like playful interior exteriority that the viewer gets to like interact with. And it's really visceral too. Like, I'm really glad you left those cyanotype armatures open and exposed, because there's these little like portholes into your process. Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, seeing that new trajectory is really exciting. And I also just wanted to touch briefly on like your animation process. So that was something I got to witness you just branching into when we were in school together, and since then you've taken off with it. But yeah, like animating your sculptures. When we were in grad school, you animated this one piece called Homebody, and built a whole set for its diorama. And I remember it was during fire season, and it was smoky and really gross outside. And you and I were being bad. We were still working, even though we weren't supposed to go to the studio. But I remember you being there.
Yeah, it was so bad. We had to wear like a 95 mask before we even knew what they were. Like this was before the pandemic, so fire season in Northern California. We were like, what's going on?
Little did we know we'd be wearing those masks.
Yeah.
But I remember we would wear them in the studio, and like so dedicated over here, you'd be in there, and I
with like a deadline, but
yeah,
it was such a sorry for interrupting.
no.
It was when I started the stop motion in Davis, it was kind of a very intense process, because I was making the set and I was like, I have to have like some styrofoam or something for the floor, so that this little tiny creature I made for the set can like stick in one spot and I can move it around slowly, and the legs were aluminum wires and things like that. And I would go back and forth with my DSLR camera and take photos, and I was like, oh, it's very time intensive, but animation, that's just the nature of it. But kind of since graduating, I did want something a little bit quicker, and a way to kind of explore how these objects in the home can come to life much more quickly. So I've been just using my phone. There's a stop motion app, and I have like a little tiny tripod that I use and just set up. And even though like the lighting changes and the animation is choppy, I feel like, it's been a very generative for me to like, make videos of my sculptures moving around, or just like the chairs kind of sliding around the dining room table and things like that. It's an animation that's off to the side.
Yeah, you have to see it. Well, because you're activating these sculptures are already like kinetic in spirit, and then you just push it all the way.
Yeah.
But a lot of these that you've been activating, you have to articulate a lot of limbs and appendages And then at the same time, you're also doing this new kind of work where you're like taking found objects that don't have limbs and appendages, like rocks and leaves, and you're also activating them. So it's nice if you see the video, you'll see there's a juxtaposition there, like the sculptures being activated and then found objects in conversation.
This is describing it so well. Yeah, and a lot of the sculptures do have some elements that I can manipulate. So even like this sculpture here has like wheels.
Oh, right.
And so does this one, and I animate those in the sculpture. But yeah, in the stop motion, I've been enjoying just like, oh, I can just move this rock around, and it kind of looks like it's alive now, just like.
And they're exploring these like facets of your backyard, these cracks on the sidewalk, and maybe this like piece of a broken frame that's leaning against a fence. So like we're getting this like very intimate journey through your.
Yeah, it's like no one's home is perfect, so I like to explore some of those like imperfections in my work, and yeah, it's been fun to do it that way.
Oh, I want to leave time for Q&A, but I just have one question left before we like bring it out for questions from our audience. But I'm just curious, overall, how do you feel after this experience at Blue Roof Studios and a room of one's own? How do you feel like you've grown as an artist?
I feel like I've grown a lot. I mean, that's just like my umbrella answer for all the experiences and like resources that this residency has provided for me, because I came in like to this residency just feeling like I was lost. Like I don't know how to be an artist in LA. I don't know what it means to maybe work on my own without like it being kind of organized by like a grad school or like a school program. It's funny because I took a business of art class last fall through the Center of Cultural Innovation, and one of the first things they told us to do were to identify our core values. I was like, what are my core values? And it's like experimentation, variety, determination, authenticity. I was like, I'll start with those and see where that leads. So I felt like those values kind of drove me to, explore things in the studio and try to be consistent with my time here. Being honest in my work. I mean, it's all from personal experience. I don't know how not to be. Yeah. But I feel like, with like my mentor Claudia told me to like try to seek out more art opportunities. So I've been doing that more often. Still trying to learn, trying to do it a little bit more, but I needed like that push.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've got to explore lots of like sculptures on the wall and animation more, and then get to make freestanding sculptures again. So I've grown, I feel like, as an artist. Also just like all the things that are adjacent to being an artist, like promoting my work, sharing more about my work on social media, and like releasing my newsletter finally and things like that. So
communicating, exactly. Like, yes, that's what I see big time. Like, you're communicating your process on like a much broader scale. Yeah, nice. Thanks so much, Brenda. Yay, thank you for talking with me.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. I'm so happy I got to do this. Yay. Oh, does anyone have a question? Oh,
thank you, Mercy, for
yay, Mercy. No, I think we have time. Let's see. Oh yeah, we've got some time for questions. If anyone, feel free. You can write in the chat box, or you could unmute yourself too. If you need to raise your hand.
Yes, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask Brenda or Julia some questions about the process, or just talking about art. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Connie.
Connie.
Of course.
Hi, Brenda. It's Mercy. I have a few questions for you. I think I'm just gonna rattle them off, and you can pick and choose which ones you feel like answering.
Yeah.
I think number one is, I'm curious, why sculpture? Why does three-dimensional form convey, your meaning that a two-dimensional form on the wall can't. I'm also interested in how you, as you're working, kind of think about the viewer's experience and how they relate to the work of art. Are you thinking about the body of the viewer and their relationship to the work? I'm also curious, how important is it to manipulate the materials? Do you want them to be like completely shifted from how you find them? The artist intervention. Okay, I have more than that, but I'll just leave it there.
Those are such good questions.
Thank you.
Val.
Thank you, Mercy. So why sculpture? I mean, it's a hard question, but like it kind of takes me back to like way back in undergrad when I first took like my intro to sculpture class. It was like summer of 2013, I think, and I was like, oh, sculpture can like bring to life my drawings. Like they can exist in physical space in a way that I don't imagine like paintings can do. At least the paint, yeah, I just felt like a connection to sculpture. There's like making like tall or freestanding sculptures kind of helps. I feel like there's like a relationship to the body. With freestanding sculpture, you can walk around it. Sculptures also can be so different depending on what point of view you're looking at them from. And lately, I feel like there's also the potential to like animate them. So being able to like manipulate some elements, I feel like that's kind of unique to a 3D objects. I mean, I guess you can animate like things like paper, but for me, it's just more fun to animate the three-dimensional. And so I guess in terms of viewers' experience, I don't know if I'm answering them like as well as or exactly the way you asked them, but I again with kind of their height, I think they're more easily relatable to viewers who may come in, and I like knowing or like hearing people that see my work like, oh, that rug is familiar to me, or I've seen that before, that reminds me of home. So I try to keep the familiarity of the materials when I manipulate them. Like I don't like I paint, sometimes I paint a little bit over them, but for the most part I try to keep the inherent color of the material. I don't, did I answer the question?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you did, definitely. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Mercy.
Those are really good questions, Mercy.
You can tell she teaches.
Yes, I know. I'm like, that's a professor question.
We use similar materials, Brenda. So these are things that I constantly think about. I'll leave it open for other people.
That's true. That's true. Some materials. Fabric. Yeah, fabric, textile artists.
I had another question about, do you think that you will always source your materials at the thrift store and the dollar store? Do you foresee a shift in that? What would happen to the work if you did start to resource in other places? What could that be? Where would the meaning shift if they weren't these sort of modest materials? How important is that to your practice?
That's a good question. I mean, they're primarily from thrift stores and dollar stores, and I do feel like that kind of speaks to my kind of low-income background growing up. But at the same time, it's not exclusive to those like materials. I don't exclusively get my materials from those places. For example, I had to purchase like just like blank white cotton for the cyanotypes. So even though that was kind of a literal blank slate, I was able to like imbue more of a personal kind of connection to that fabric by the techniques applied to it. And I like that they're modest materials, but let's see. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, I don't know where my work will take me in the future. I just want to see what works for me at the moment. And then if in the future I end up using like scraps of different types of fabric or leave fabric altogether, then I'm open to that. But I think for now, this is kind of what feels right.
Actually, sorry, Mercy, that's such a cool question because it made me think like, would you ever cyanotype on like a found textile? Because it could even work, it doesn't have to be like white sheet.
I think it has to be like a natural
Okay.
like fiber.
Okay.
But I mean, I was like, oh, it would be cool if the the fabric had like a pattern on it already, or I mean, I don't know exactly. I haven't used it yet, and so I don't know if it needs to be on natural materials. But there's also like another type of dye called solar fast that does very similar things and has a wider color range. So I was like, I wanted to try it for this residency, but I didn't get around to it. I was like, I was gonna do like a pink one for the pink.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
But yeah, I don't know if that could be on a different type of fabric, but
yeah, like if you could do that on a placemat or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
that would be so cool.
right. Oof.
Brenda, I wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
Who are some of your inspirations as an artist, or where do you find other artists that you like reference, or when you look to and you think about process and you think about work? Who are you influenced by?
Right now the first two that come to mind, because I mentioned them for the LA Weekly article, were like Do Hosu and Heidi Boucher, and I feel like I'm not saying their names right. They use textiles and think about the home and memory, but in different ways. So I really like the way they treat fabric and things like that. I also like Judy Pfaff for like the kind of plethora of materials she uses, and like especially her wall pieces. Louise Bourgeois, that's a classic. I remember there was like a spider, one of her spiders, like temporarily at the art building in front of at Dartmouth when I was an undergrad. So I would walk past it like every day. I would see like under snow. I was like, oh yeah. Anyways.
And in terms of size, because you do have pieces in several different sizes, from the walls to the pedestals to the floor, do you find that you favor a certain working in a certain kind of way that's maybe more intimate? Do you like bigger? Would you want to go bigger? Like, or does it all feel, it just kind of speaks to you as you're working on it and it just turns out to be what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I like to stretch myself, so I like to work, like, I want to be able to tell myself I can work small and I can work big, but I'm still working on the big part. Yeah, so, but I do, I can get really into small moments, so I think I work more loosely in larger sculptures, so I think that's a benefit of working largely. In smaller sculptures, they're just easier to handle, but, I think I might have forgotten the question already.
Did you have a preference?
Oh, it changes the scale. I mean, I'm always like open to working in different scales. I think I want to like maybe take more classes on like in like a wood shop so that I can like build, more structurally sound sculpture so that I can go bigger and I can be like confident about that. But so I mean, I think working bigger has like also different energy too, because you can, walk around it. Yeah.
I could even see this being,
Yeah, I want to try to go bigger. But I think working small is what's feasible for me right now. But luckily this residency let me, practice working bigger again after a while. So.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? All right, well, Brenda, it's been wonderful having you here and wonderful hearing you talk. And Julia, so great to meet you. Brenda's show Creature Comforts is open until May 31st. So please come by and check her out. And you can book an appointment because it is by appointment only on Calendly. And yeah. So it's great to see you, Brenda.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, everybody, for
Julia.
joining.
Thank you for all make it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mercy.
Thank you, Mercy. Thank you, Gabby.
Love you, Mercy.